Hello there, Ian here, and great to be with you once more. And may I wish you all a very happy Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year, and I hope the new year of the boar or the pig has started well for you. And if you were celebrating over this period, I hope you had a great time with friends and family. Today, I'd like to build on an idea I shared in a previous post about lessons learned from the past. Now, there's a phrase, and I think it originated in Germany, I'm not quite sure, and the phrase says this: all progress is change, but not all change is progress. And I'd like to build on that idea using two examples. Now, many of you know that have come to our talks and seminars, I love the science behind the Apollo missions that put us on the moon. And I also love sport. So two things occurred to me, and I'll illustrate what I mean by change, progress and lessons by using two examples: the Apollo space missions and Manchester United. If you're neither a science or a sports fan, follow me through and the lessons will still be relevant to you. Here's what I mean. So let's take the Apollo missions first, and let's go back to the early 1960s with President John F. Kennedy's famous declaration about sending a man to the moon and bringing him safely back before the decade is out, before the end of the 1960s. Now, that project was in three phases. They needed to get a man into space to begin with and learn about rocketry and trajectories, and that project was Project Mercury. 7 astronauts were picked, and they learned about whether we could survive in space and indeed go round the Earth in Earth orbit. The next phase was Project Gemini, and during Gemini they learned the techniques of docking and long duration space flights and spacewalking, getting out of the spacecraft. Then came Apollo, the project that would take man to the moon. Now, during that time, Apollo 1 was the first fully fledged Apollo spacecraft, and during a test, 3 men died. And they were Gus Grissom, Ed White and Roger Chaffee. Now, when we say all change is not progress, during those 2 previous projects, a lot of lessons were learned. Methods and procedures and a culture of doing things was learned during those first 2 projects. Now, much of that seems to have been abandoned when it came to Apollo, and the very early phases of that project were marked, it turned out, by shoddy workmanship, a lack of attention to detail, protocols that were short-circuited, and there was a launch pad fire during a test. A fire broke out in an oxygen-rich environment and it incinerated everything inside it, and the crew died. The investigation into those deaths learned that, or revealed that, a lot of things were not up to standard. So the lesson there is that all the lessons that had been learned previously seem to have been abandoned, and what got them to that stage, success after success, was thrown out. And that's a great example of all change not being progress. It was a brand new spacecraft, brand new technology, but a lot of things seem to have been abandoned. When they looked and they got back to fundamentals and back to basics, they redesigned the spacecraft in, I think it was just under 2 years, got back on track, and then they had a very successful series of moon landings. With the exception of Apollo 13 and that great film starring Tom Hanks. Let's take a look at Manchester United, the most successful club in English football history. Sir Alex Ferguson had built this fantastic team of players, and when he retired right at the top of their successes. They had run championship after championship, cup after cup, and They're one of the most successful sports brands in the world today. They haven't been doing so well in the post-Ferguson arena. Successive managers, there were 3 successive top drawer managers that have progressively really failed to do anything like what Ferguson put together. Now, if you follow the news, they've got a new guy in called Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who's a Norwegian former player, and he was, I think it was 11 matches without a loss. He got 10 wins and 1 draw, I think. And okay, they recently got beat by Paris Saint-Germain by 2 goals to 0 in the Champions League, and that was really his first loss in those first 12 games. So how does a manager switch from dismal performance to 11 unbeaten games? Well, if you look below the surface, under the 3 previous managers after Ferguson, they progressively dismantled all of the things that he put in place to establish that great team. They dismantled what had made them great. Now, all progress means change, but not all change is progress. They dismantled what he had built into that fantastic machine. Solskjaer, when he came back, seemed to be getting back to basics, visiting the entire organisation, all the backroom staff, the training staff, the academy, the touches of consideration, the criticism of players has been kept private but not public. You've got to make sure the players know what they're doing right and how they can improve, but don't do it in public. He's brought that back behind closed doors. He's also recruited some of the players or some of the coaching staff and the advisory staff that were key behind the scenes figures during Alex Ferguson's reign. So he seems to have got back to what made them great when they were on that amazing run of successes. So what can we learn? What's the lesson for ourselves in our businesses and our lives? Remember, if we are going to progress, progress does mean change, but not change for the sake of change. Not all change is progress. So, do we have to change? Yes, of course we do. We have to take risks, we have to experiment and see if things work. But when you've got a winning team, don't get rid of what has made you great up to now. Change in the future for sure, but don't forget the lessons of the past that got you to where you are now. I really hope that that made sense, and I wish you the very best in the new year, the new Chinese year, and indeed the new calendar year, and I hope that you're thriving and in great shape. I look forward to being with you again soon.